Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. I'm Nick Park and I'm teaching a series of short 5-minute messages on finding Jesus in all the books of the Old Testament. And I want to tell you, it's not too hard. I find Jesus on every page of every book of the Old Testament because Jesus is the subject. He's the great theme of Scripture, both Old and New Testament. New Testament tells us about the life of Jesus, the birth, life, death, resurrection of Jesus. It tells us about how the church moved on and moved in the power of Jesus. But the Old Testament looks forward to Jesus. And there are so many passages there that actually speak about Jesus. And we're in the book of Job at the moment, and we're talking today about the promise of resurrection. You see, we have a principle that we see throughout the Old Testament called progressive revelation. And that is that God didn't give us the full revelation of everything straight away because it would have blown our minds. You know, it's like God said to Habakkuk. He said, I'm going to do something in your generation that you wouldn't believe it if I told you. If God had given the full message about everything that he was going to do and everything that was going to happen in Jesus and everything else, it would have blown their minds. It would be like taking somebody off a remote island that had never encountered any modern technology and trying to explain the space mission to them. Wouldn't have worked. And so God progressively revealed himself and his will to mankind. And one of the things that took a while to get across to people was what happened after death. And in the Old Testament, people still did not have a full revelation of the doctrine of the resurrection from the dead. And so the Jewish people believed that when you died, you did continue in some form after death, but it was not very substantial. It was like a shadowy world that you moved in. They called it Sheol. Sometimes it's mistranslated as the grave. Sheol does not refer just to the physical grave. We know this because whenever Jacob thought that Joseph had been killed by wild animals, he said, I am going to go down to my grave to be with Joseph. Now, Joseph was not in the physical grave. I mean, as far as Jacob thought, obviously the other sons were lying to him, but Jacob thought he'd been killed by wild animals. So, you know, realistically, Jacob thought Joseph had been turned into animal poop. But he still said, I'm going to go down to be with him in the grave. And the word there is Sheol. It's talking about the shadowy world where the dead lived on, but it wasn't very substantial. It wasn't very real. Other times the word Sheol in the Old Testament has been translated as hell. It's most certainly not talking about hell as we speak of hell as being a place of everlasting separation from God and punishment for the wicked. It was this place of the dead. And Job himself, he subscribed to this view. This is what he believed. He says this at one point, as a cloud vanishes and is gone, so he who goes down to the grave does not return. He will never come to his house again. His place will know him no more. And so there's this idea that when you're gone, you're gone. You might sort of exist in some shadowy spirit somewhere, but it's not really very real. Whereas, of course, the Christian truth that Jesus came to reveal to us is that our life after death is more real than our life now, and more concrete and more substantial. And that's because of the resurrection from the dead. But you know, God brought Job through to a place, even while he was still in his place of suffering and doubting and questioning, God brought Job through to a place where suddenly he saw something differently. And it's in Job chapter 19, verses 23 to 27. Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead, or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another. How my heart yearns within me. So Job, suddenly, in the midst of all his doubting and confused thinking, he gets a revelation of the resurrection. You know, this is the Old Testament equivalent of when Peter had that revelation. Jesus says, "Who do men say I am?" And Peter says, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of John. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but by my Father which is in heaven." And now Job here had this revelation from God about the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that Jesus, a Redeemer, would come, who would be raised from the dead and stand on the earth in the flesh. And because of that, Job himself would be raised from the dead and also stand in the flesh and see his Redeemer face to face. And there you have a massive revelation of Jesus right in the middle of the book of Job. God bless you today. May the power of the resurrected Christ be with you. And join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.